The Belmont clan is a bloodline comprised of many legendary warriors in their fabled 1,000-year-long battle against the Lord of the Dark, Dracula. From its origins in Leon Belmont, a man whose sacrifice birthed the vampire killer Whip, to Trevor Belmont, whose charisma won over many allies in the battles to come against the Dark, and even Simon Belmont, whose overwhelming determination helped him annihilate the Dark Lord and his minions many times. Though probably one of the most unique approaches of a Belmont comes in the form of the spell-slinging silver-haired successor of fate, Juste Belmont.
Fear has no form. Fear has no name. But now, fear has an address. Castlevania.
Juste Belmont is the grandson of the great Simon Belmont, born 50 years after the events of Simon's Quest, in a village established by people who considered Simon and the Belmonts to be savior figures for the whole world. It is also in this village that other vampire hunters would gather, and this is where Juste met his best friend, Maxim, the two of them pushing each other to achieve greater feats in their training, but thanks to Juste's natural talent, he would become overwhelming and overshadowing, building up an envious hatred in Maxim, though Juste's own talents weren't just because of his Belmont upbringing, but was also because of the potent Blanders clan magic coursing through his veins, giving him a special talent known as spell fusion. Though before we discuss that any further, let's understand the meaning behind his name and design. Juste Belmont's name is a rather simple one on the surface, starting of course first with the Belmont part of his name, which in the original Japanese is written and pronounced Belmondo, and is a direct reference to the French New Wave film star Jean-Paul Belmondo, and was selected back in the day because the developers wanted to give their protagonist a strong European-sounding name, and Belmondo was decided upon thanks to his popularity. Though, interestingly enough, the Jean part of Jean-Paul Belmondo was actually selected by the mangaka Hidehiko Araki when creating the French Crusader Jean-Pierre Polnareff, which is only one of the many correlations or just straight-up references to JoJo in the whole of the Castlevania series. Though, staying with the French naming themes, the name Juste is also French in origin as well, and directly means just or righteous, meaning that his name reads as the Righteous Belmont. This could in fact be a reference to his sort of semi-morality system that dictates the ending of Harmony of Dissonance. This being whether or not Juste wears the friendship bracelet that he and Maxim always wore when they were kids, which helps him dispel Dracula's dark influence and save his friends. And it's this purifying element of his character that also plays into his overall design. As you might have noticed, Juste doesn't exactly look like your typical Belmont design, as his silvery white hair, eyes, and overall aristocratian design matches that more of Alucard than his own grandfather. He certainly stands out in the group shot. This design was likely chosen to get across Juste's own unique characteristics, such as his natural purity as a hunter, due to his upbringing as a Belmont. Juste was completely devoid of the darkness that clouded people's minds, such as his rival Maxim, with Maxim even having jet black hair to reinforce this dual aspect of their designs. The more aristocratian outfit of Juste also communicates to the player that he is weaker physically compared to someone like Simon or Maxim, who dress in more loosely fit outfits that also highlight their physical elements. Along with this, Juste's own white hair plays into his own gifted nature, as in fantasy media, white hair tends to be symbolically connected to those with special powers, usually magical in nature, as white hair often draws from the same visual elements of the wise wizard whose smarts or magic helps make up for their lacking physical strength. Thus, with Juste having this long silvery white hair, you can infer that he makes up for his lack of physical abilities with his own magical potential. And this is represented in full with Juste literally glowing blue with his own magic potency, this being the magic of the Blanders clan. In fact, he has so much magical energy coursing through him that he's strong enough to force the alchemical whip, the vampire killer, to fully evolve into its chain form at all times while he's wielding it. Along with this, Juste from the very beginning of the game can dash, an ability that you'd have to pick up in later entries. He is assumedly always buffing his physical status with his magical energy, though his magical abilities really become apparent with Juste's own upgrade system, starting first with his whip tips, in which Juste will attach magical artifacts that he finds throughout Castlevania to the tip a vampire killer, which will change the properties of the whip, such as its elemental affinity or its destructive power, even being able to attach a massive wrecking ball style steel tip. Though these aren't the only vampire hunting tools that Juste has in his arsenal, as he also uses a variety of sub-weapons, from the classics to his own unique Sacred Fist, which is an item where Juste magically enchants his own fist and then unloads a fury of punches while calling out a barrage of Ora, which is a combined reference of Saint Seiya and JoJo. Though much like how he can modify his whip, Juste, once he gets his hands on some spellbooks, can perform his unique ability of Spell Fusion, where he focuses the magical energy of the spellbook into his sub-weapons, creating distinct attacks, some which look rather familiar, and others which are entirely unique to Juste alone. This can be understood as the origin of his descendant Richter's own Item Crash ability, though speaking of his spellbooks, it would appear that some of the books that Juste collects belong to his ancestor Sypha Blanders, that she used during her run in Castlevania 3, specifically the 3 major elemental tomes, being Fire, Ice, and Thunder, which, side tangent, I just wanted to point out that the Thunder tome, in the original Castlevania 3, had its attack name localized to goodness gracious great balls of lightning. That doesn't really impact anything about this. I just felt like I should improve your life today. Though, besides those 3, he also discovers the Wind Tome and later the Summoning Tome, making Juste the only Belmont to receive direct aid from a spiritual familiar in his adventure through Castlevania. Though, interestingly enough, while he was prepared for this, normally Juste would have never had to take up his family tradition of hunting Dracula. He was born in a relatively calm point between Dracula's resurrections, but in that calm, he was still raised to hunt the night, because monsters and demons were still drawn to the world by the absence of the ultimate evil. And because of this, the village that Juste was raised in had a large plethora of monster hunting families in it as well. And in his youth, he would befriend Maxim and Liddy, developing a friendly rivalry with the former and a romantic attraction to the latter, at least assumedly. Maxim and Juste were such close friends in their training that the two of them would wear matching bracelets, even up into their later years. Though, when they turned 16, Juste and Maxim would compete for the ownership of the vampire killer, Juste earning his birthright and unknowingly driving an envious snail between him and Maxim, as Maxim believed that he deserved the whip and left the village for 2 years on a long training expedition, when in reality he was gathering the pieces of Dracula that Juste would be tasked with recovering over his life so that he could revive and slay the Dark Lord to earn the status of a vampire killer. Though, during the expedition, Maxim was possessed by Dracula's wrath, creating a split personality that is comprised of his envy, and through the assistance of death, a ritual to revive the Dark Lord 50 years early would begin. He would kidnap Liddy from the village and bring her to the Chaos Castle, before returning to his village with his memory of everything that he had done gone. Together, Maxim and Juste head out to the castle to save their best friend. And as you explore the castle, you'll start to notice some strange things. For instance, the previously mentioned split personality of Maxim, or the parallel castle in another universe, to Juste's own obsession with redecorating, which actually brings up a strangeness of Juste's own character. He's one of the oddest protagonists in a Castlevania game, but that mostly comes from his own reserved nature. He doesn't have a lot to say, so the things that he does say really stick out. As while traveling through the Chaos Castle and uncovering all these clues about Dracula's impending revival, he still takes time to redecorate a single room to his liking. He's also selfless to a fault, which makes him somewhat charming, and his friendship with Maxim feels really genuine. And ultimately, in the final acts of the game, Juste uncovers the truth of the whole ordeal going on in this castle, and fights to bring his friend's consciousness back to the surface and overwhelm the darkness controlling him, doing so by wearing both his and Maxim's bracelet in their final encounter, causing Maxim to overpower the Dark Lord's influence and force the wrath of Dracula to take its own form, which Juste defeats and banishes. Fulfilling his destiny as a Belmont, he then reunites with his friends outside the castle, and ultimately pretends the whole situation never happened, forgiving Maxim fully for what he did and clearing his name. Oh yeah, and you also save Liddy, I guess. I mean, unless you grab every piece of furniture in the castle and decorate the room, then Liddy grabs onto Juste's arm, implying that they will get together. That's right, the way you impress your French maid is buying more furniture. I wonder if that's why Richter breaks all that stuff in Dracula's castle. It's like pent-up aggression for living in a house with two people who are just hoarders. Harmony of Dissonance and Juste were both created in a way for Igarashi to move the Castlevania series into a new direction after Circle of the Moon, pushing the limits of the Game Boy and redesigning redesigning the game as a whole to give Castlevania more of an action-y feel, with Juste being given more mobility options to mimic more of Alucard than any of the previous Belmonts. In fact, the game is unofficially designed in a way to be Symphony of the Night 2, which also explains a lot of similarities between plot and design of characters. Juste also is the final playable Belmont in a main campaign of a Castlevania story, as from this point on, the protagonists would either be changed up or become people standing in for Belmonts, or the Belmonts would be an unlockable side campaign that isn't entirely canon. Though, if anything I've mentioned here interests you, the recently released Castlevania Advanced Collection has Juste's story in it in its entirety, and it's the most approachable way it's ever been. It also has Aria of Sorrow in it, so it's already worth whatever price tag they put on it. So, go check that out. And with that all said and done, if you enjoyed this video and want to support more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. And if you want something to redecorate your room that would really bring it all together, I hear Juste himself is looking for a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World with the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimonetta.com.